Hello and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where it's not time to celebrate just yet, but we're almost there. Yes, Joker should be joining Hollywood's elite club sometime this week, probably early this week, so don't go anywhere. And I will, of course, do a special report when it does. And Joker, a stunning achievement in so many ways, will surely keep Warner Brothers in its happy place, as it's the only pick from the studio to really connect not just this fall, but the entire year. And it doesn't look like anything else is lined up to change that by the end of 2019. See, Warner Brothers, who has made quite the name for itself in the horror genre, was set to dominate all season long with 3 releases. And it's not like they overcrowded it. There's just a problem with the varying degrees of, well, we'll talk about Dr. Sleep. I'm coming around, even though I still personally don't care for the movie, to what's going on here. You know, not necessarily it's a bad movie, but we'll see. But anyway, like a very old scary story, one was huge, one was all right, and one was, are you kidding me? All right, so at least I'm sure that's what everyone creatively and financially involved with this film had to say this today on Sunday when the numbers were looking bad from the Thursday night. And the movie never woke up. A lot of sleeping metaphors this weekend describing Dr. Sleep's box office. I've seen comatose is one of the favorites, sleepy, etc. Because yes, Dr. Sleep was projected to be the easy winner this weekend with a moderate $25 million, but it would have gotten the job done with the #1 opening. But instead, it came in at half that, losing the top spot to Midway. How that was like the laughing stock of like the industry this weekend, but they're not, only the people who made that movie are laughing now. However, those who did decide to see Dr. Sleep in theaters were very happy with that choice, to be fair, as the film has a B+ cinema score, which is very strong for horror, and a small but potent fan base. I'd say that's a mix of not just fans, but also members of the media, has popped up online vehemently defending the film. The trades even. Deadline was Deadline's box office report was very slanted towards Dr. Sleep, saying what a great movie it is, and it's a shame it's not doing better. So in fact, it reminds me, interestingly enough, of Hereditary, and to make it even more interesting, Hereditary opened at about the same number last summer as Dr. Sleep. Now, Heredity had a D+ cinema score, though, I said cinema scores are pretty bad for the horror genre, but even for the horror genre, that's bad. And it faded away rather quickly, but it still had a solid overall domestic gross, which at this point, Dr. Sleep would kill for. Now, I don't know how long Dr. Sleep can haunt theaters, even with that strong cinema score, because there's competitive adult fare like Ford versus Ferrari and Knives Out closing in. But I feel Dr. Sleep could very well be a juggernaut on streaming, which is maybe where it should have been all along. Very prestigious debut on HBO Max, HBO Max, of course, is not coming out until May 2020, so they would have had to shelve the film for a very long time. Although this is so bad, maybe that it would have, in the long run, been the right move anyway. Now, first off, there's the hard truth that no matter how much some of us might like The Shining, it's never been a hugely popular film. And actually, it's a divisive film. A lot of people who like the book, and the person who wrote the book, in fact, Stephen King, prefer that to what Stanley Kubrick did with the movie. So there's that issue. Then, Ewan McGregor has always struggled at the box office. Alarming for Birds of Prey, where he's supposed to be the big get and be the crossover actor to draw in, I think, mainstream and male audiences for a smaller, mostly female niche picture. And shows also that Kathleen Kennedy and company were probably right to make Obi-Wan a Disney Plus streaming series rather than a movie. Then there's Mike Flanagan, who's famous for, a streaming series on Netflix, The Haunting of Hill House. And at 2.5 hours, with few scares and more deep thoughts, it seems that audiences likely decided Dr. Sleep really wasn't something worth seeing on the big screen. They might not have passed on it, they might have just put a pin in it. I'm curious, what have you done with Dr. Sleep? Because I know a lot of you didn't see it because it made no money. This is a very bad opening. There's no way you can put a good spin on this. Except for it'll do well on streaming. Now, there's also some debate starting to develop as to whether or not audiences like really long movies, right? Was Dr. Sleep too long? Now, length was considered a huge plus for Avengers Endgame. Oh boy, the movie's never going to end. And a huge negative for It Chapter 2. Is this movie ever going to end? But then, also I have to point out that some of the biggest movies of all time were quite long. Not just Titanic, but Gone with the Wind, made in the 1930s. Now, clearly, movie length, I think it's very clear, although Hollywood seems to be struggling with this, movie length shouldn't be decided by some Hollywood formula or audiences like long movies, right? But it should be whether or not there's enough story to support such a long running time, plus obvious creative elements like pacing, etc. I mean, come on. These films are screened in advance, and you can tell if they're dragging or not. I mean, we sit down and we look at them and we go, you know, like with It Chapter 2, and I personally feel with Dr. Sleep, and even if you like Dr. Sleep, I think you have to be like, is this worth seeing on the big screen? That's what I think executives need to start asking themselves. So I think that this begs the question, who's watching these films in advance, and why aren't they very good arbiters of what's going on with these movies, right? I personally feel that it's been the long problem of Hollywood that Hollywood often is not the consumer of their own product. And so a lot of Hollywood executives take the stance of, I don't know what audience is like, so I have to base it on like formulas and, things that I've guessed from other movies' successes that I don't understand. That's what the Hollywood executives say. But I think that's why it benefits to have someone like Kevin Feige who genuinely loves the material that he makes, and that's why he knows when something's working or not. So, again, Hollywood, you should start sampling your own product and genuinely liking the movies that you make. I mean, Hollywood is like, it's weird. It's one of the only business, well, this is maybe not true. It's weird. It's weird to have businesses where they have such disdain for their product and sometimes even their customer. It's so bizarre. You would think you would only go into something that you loved, although there's a lot of money to be made in Hollywood. In all businesses. It's tough. All right, so anyway, let's get back to the box office. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think that cutting an hour off of Dr. Sleep would have made it any more competitive box office-wise. I think its problems are deeper than that. I think in its DNA, it's a streaming show. And in fact, I personally think adding a few more hours would have helped the film, is from my perspective, as to how I felt about it. And Mike Flanagan, I think, is clearly a storyteller who works best with the longer format. I think he should maybe take a long look in the mirror and consider that when he chooses his projects going forward. As for Midway, expectations for this film were so low that even its mediocre first place, that's the most important part of the sentence, finish, is cause for celebration. Who's partying? Lionsgate, Red States, and Mr. Roland Emmerich. Yes, Emmerich hasn't had a hit in a decade, but boy, 2012 was such a good popcorn movie. And while creatively Midway sputters, it's quite the operation business-wise, right? It was released for Veterans Day weekend with Lionsgate targeting Red States specifically. And those moviegoers not only came out to see Midway, but gave it an A cinema score. I saw it last night. I personally do not feel it's deserving of that score. As I said on the member stream today, I felt it was like if a male modeling agency was like, we'll make our own movie, damn it, and prove we can act. And they didn't prove it. It was weird. There are a lot of actors in that movie that are pretty good actors, and they were just horrible there. And I even thought VFX-wise, it seemed a little cheap. But it did do a good job highlighting the bravery and sacrifice of that generation at that time. So, if you're going to see Midway, Veterans Day weekend is the weekend to see it. Furthermore, a large part of the budget is covered by a distribution deal with China. And the film highlights how China helped the U.S. during World War II at a great human cost. China and Japan, if you didn't know this, hate each other, largely because of World War II, which the movie plays into. Although it does work very hard to also be fair to the Japanese. And it still got an A from veterans and red states, which just shows how complex war really is. In fact, all 4 top spots this weekend were taken by new releases. So that's a little unusual. Usually some of them are at the top and the rest kind of settle around in the middle of the pack. So I think that speaks maybe to the strength of the new releases, but I think even more so to the weakness of the holdovers. Emilia Clarke also continues to have bad luck at the box office, as do all her Game of Thrones co-stars. I mean, I know Gwendolyn Christie was in the Star Wars movies, but her character's so lame. And I think that can count as part of the Game of Thrones movie curse. Let's see if Kit Harington and Richard Madden can break that with MCU's Eternals. How strong is the Game of Thrones curse? Can it even hurt the MCU? I don't know. It's crazy. Paul Feig could have used better news, that's for sure. But luckily, it's too early in Henry Golding's career to do any real damage to his box office image. But it ain't great, I'll tell you that. It's like Rebecca Ferguson with Dr. Sleep. Neither actor can really be blamed for what happened. And both are very talented, by the way. I like Rebecca Ferguson a bit more than Henry Golding. I think Henry Golding's a tiny bit bland. But some people might feel the same way about Rebecca Ferguson, to be honest with you. I don't know how much range she has. I think she's very talented and charismatic, but I think she's always, to some degree, well, a lot of actors do that, like Harrison Ford's always a Harrison Ford, Gal Gadot's always Gal Gadot, The Rock's always The Rock, but I don't know if Rebecca Ferguson has that charisma to always just be Rebecca Ferguson. But I don't think either of them is proving to be a box office boost, which would concern me casting them going forward. Henry Golding, of course, is supposed to be Snake Eyes, which now, I'd be a little scared of that with that movie, quite frankly, after this performance. Playing with Fire didn't set the box office on fire, but the family pick had a respectable opening. It's like Midway. People had such low expectations for it. It's like, oh wow, the movie didn't embarrass itself, right? It has a photo finish with Last Christmas towards the top of the box office, and John Cena already has Suicide Squad 2 and Fast and Furious 9 lined up. His agent is amazing. Wow. All right. John Cena, he didn't give up. He stuck around, and look how well he's doing. That's just incredible to me. He's riding The Rock's coattails a little bit, but hey, he's doing it. Ronda Rousey couldn't. I think John Cena's a much better actor than Ronda Rousey. His one-liners in Bumblebee were amazing. All right, and he delivered them very well. All right, but it's doubtful if anyone besides James Cameron associated with Terminator Dark Fate will ever have something lined up again, as the flick, which angered many fans before it even opened, and this is ironic because James Cameron is the one who had that dumb idea, but he's the only one who's going to continue because of the Avatar movies, although I do think his reputation is considerably tarnished now as well. But it fell 65%, as you can see, in its second weekend, and likely won't even be able to hit the century mark stateside. That's shocking. Maleficent 2 will hit the century mark, though, as it, along with Joker, enjoyed the smallest drops in the top 10. And Maleficent 2 edged past Addams Family. Woo! Although I think Addams Family will also probably just barely hit the century mark as well, which is incredible for that movie. A little bit of a disappointment for Maleficent 2, shockingly good for Addams Family. As for Jojo Rabbit, this weekend was its nationwide expansion, but I put it in quotation marks because it's still less than 1,000 theaters, and usually a nationwide expansion is over 2,000, 3,000 theaters. So it's still playing in very few theaters, but it wasn't enough to break into the top 10 even still. And as more and more movies continue to pile on, one has to wonder if Jojo Rabbit ever will make it into the top 10. Although maybe it will next week. The next 2 weeks are its best chance to do so. But you know what? Parasite never made it into the top 10 either. And Parasite does, though, by the way, have the best per theater average opening of the year going for it, as well as the top prize it can. Although Jojo Rabbit, of course, won the coveted Audience Award at Toronto, which is supposed to be something that is a precursor to a lot of awards nominations. So I think there's still a big question mark for both these movies when it comes to how they'll do with awards noms. I personally feel Parasite has a little bit more traction, and they're still writing very compelling articles about it. In fact, I'll put a link down below to the Hollywood Reporter, which did a fabulous job talking about the visuals and how the movie came to be for Parasite, which I thought was a fantastic read. And so I think Jojo Rabbit maybe faded away a little bit I think it peaked too early in terms of when votes are actually coming in, but you never know. You never know. I think Parasite's ad campaign is extremely well run. It also has the benefit of being a foreign language film, and so those are kind of like in a little bit of a separate category, in a separate space. Now, as for this, also, I do think that while I've been very vocal of my criticism of Jojo Rabbit, I think a lot of other people probably don't want to get into that. So we'll see how much, if it's like the iceberg that sunk the Titanic, we'll see how much of that is underneath the surface, maybe, and will result in a lack of nominations, or maybe it'll be a huge have a ton of nominations. But I think we'll get a good idea of how the people in Hollywood really feel about Jojo Rabbit when those nominations start to come through. It's turning out to be a surprisingly competitive year, I have to say. Now, as for this coming weekend, it's another dog pile. Ford versus Ferrari is expected to easily take first place, but so was Dr. Sleep, and Ford versus Ferrari is also over 2 hours. So we'll see if genuine movie stars, Bale and particularly Matt Damon, do make a difference. Meanwhile, Charlie's Angels is looking to tank Elizabeth Banks' career in a single weekend, and she owns that boy. Directed, written, and produced by, and starring Elizabeth Banks. Oh, she should have spread that around a little bit more, maybe, in hindsight. Well, maybe she can. I don't think she could even blame it on Kristen Stewart. She has such ownership of that film. While The Good Liar will also fight to be seen as a big screen movie rather than a streaming film. So, how do you decide what's worth seeing on the big screen? And are there any movies that you intend to watch but are just genuinely waiting to watch on streaming? Share those thoughts down below. That's this week's Movie Math. Thanks for going over the box office with me. Subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.